Mara and Elias had always been curious, drawn to places others avoided. When they stumbled upon the old, abandoned house at the edge of town, its windows shattered and a swinging sign warning "Do not enter," they didn't hesitate. But the house was waiting. It knew them before they even stepped inside. And what awaited in the shadows would change everything they thought they knew about fear. I had always been drawn to places that others avoided, to abandoned houses and empty streets where silence weighed heavier than air. There was something about the forgotten, the decaying, that pulled me in, that made my heart race with anticipation. That's how I found the house at the edge of town. From a distance it looked as though it had been swallowed by shadows. Its paint peeled and blackened, its roof sagging under years of neglect. A wooden sign hung crookedly from rusted chains. "Do not enter." The words were faded, but the warning was unmistakable. Most people would have walked away, but not me. I had never been afraid of warnings. The closer I got, the colder the air seemed to become. The wind carried the smell of damp earth and rotting wood. Branches scraped against the walls as if trying to warn me off, and leaves skittered across the yard with a sound that made my skin crawl. I paused for a moment at the gate, staring at the house. The windows were shattered, jagged edges reflecting what little light the overcast sky provided. I could see dark hollows where rooms once were. The front door hung slightly open, and something about the darkness beyond it made my stomach twist. Yet I stepped forward anyway, the thrill of the unknown stronger than my fear. Inside, the air was thick and heavy, filled with dust and the faint metallic scent of decay. Every step I took echoed through the empty halls, bouncing off the walls and sealing in a way that made me feel as though the house itself was watching me. The floorboards groaned beneath my weight, protesting my intrusion. The wallpaper was yellowed and peeling, curling away from the walls like dying leaves. Broken furniture lay scattered across the floor, chairs tipped over and a table split in half. Something about the disorder felt deliberate, as if the house itself had arranged it to unsettle anyone who dared enter. I moved cautiously, shining my flashlight ahead. The beam cut through the darkness in narrow slices, illuminating more broken furniture, cracked mirrors, and a staircase that led to the basement. The stairs were wooden, old, and trembling under the weight of years. I could feel the chill coming from below, even from here. A cold that wasn't just temperature, it seemed alive, reaching for me, testing me. I should have stopped. I should have turned back and left the house to its silence, but I couldn't. My curiosity was a fire I could not extinguish. The basement door was slightly open. I hesitated at the threshold, listening to the silence. It was too perfect, too complete. There were no sounds of rats or wind, no creaking of distant floorboards, just a deep, heavy stillness that made my chest tighten. I pushed the door gently, and it creaked as it opened, releasing a gust of cold air that smelled of iron and damp soil. I stepped inside, and the darkness seemed to swallow me whole. My flashlight flickered, struggling against the blackness, and for a moment I thought I saw shapes moving just beyond the beam. The walls were covered in scratches, deep and uneven. Some were so jagged they looked as though someone had clawed at the wood with desperation. My eyes adjusted and I realized that these scratches formed letters. I leaned closer, my breath fogging in the chill air. The words were clear, written with something dark and sticky that gleamed even in the faint light. "You should have turned back." My heart began to hammer in my chest, my hands trembling as I reached to touch the wall. It was cold, unnervingly so, as if the words themselves were alive. I wanted to leave, I really did. But something held me there, a force I couldn't name. It wasn't just curiosity, now it was a compulsion, an invisible thread that tied me to the basement and the warning on the wall. I shone my flashlight around the room, trying to see if there was any other writing, any clue about who had been here before me. The beam caught a corner of the basement, and I froze. A shadow moved across the floor, quick and silent, vanishing before I could focus on it. My pulse spiked. I told myself it was my imagination, that fear was playing tricks on me, but deep down I knew that wasn't true. I turned to leave, but the door slammed shut with a force that made the walls vibrate. My flashlight flickered again, and in that moment of darkness, I thought I saw a figure standing at the far end of the basement. It wasn't moving like a normal person. Its head was tilted at an impossible angle, its body unnaturally still. I blinked and it was gone, leaving only the cold air and the echo of my own breathing. The basement was alive. I realized then, it was waiting, watching, and I had walked right into its trap. My heartbeat thundered in my ears as I backed toward the stairs, unable to shake the feeling that many eyes were following me. Something about that place knew I was there, and it wasn't going to let me leave. And then, just before I reached the top of the stairs, I heard a faint whisper, so soft I thought I imagined it. "Stay." I couldn't stop thinking about the basement, even after I left the house that first day. The memory of the scratches on the wall, the words carved deep into the wood, "You should have turned back," haunted me. Sleep became impossible. Every shadow in my room seemed to twitch when I wasn't looking, and every creak in the floorboards sounded like footsteps following me. Even in the daylight, I could feel something lingering at the edge of my vision, watching, waiting. I tried to tell myself it was my imagination, that fear had taken hold, but the thought of that basement, the darkness inside it, refused to leave me. The next day, I went back. I told myself it was just to make sense of what I had seen, to prove to myself that the house was empty and harmless. I brought a stronger flashlight, a camera, and my phone, just in case. The house looked the same, abandoned and rotting, but there was a quiet feeling about it now, as if it recognized me and was expecting me. The wind whistled through broken windows, and the door to the basement was wide open. I froze at the threshold, my stomach twisting, but I stepped inside anyway. The basement smelled the same as before, damp and metallic, but there was something new. A faint, almost imperceptible hum filled the air, like the low vibration of a machine running far away. I swept my flashlight across the walls, and my eyes immediately found the scratches. The original words were still there, etched deep and dark. "You should have turned back." My stomach clenched. I leaned closer, my curiosity fighting the fear curling inside me. That's when I saw it. Below the original warning, new scratches had appeared. Fresh scratches. They hadn't been there yesterday, hadn't been there when I first came here. My heart raced as I realized the new scratches formed words that I had noticed before. "I see you." The letters were jagged, like someone had written them with their fingernails, and a wet, dark substance dripped faintly from them. I stepped back, almost tripping over a broken chair, and my flashlight flickered violently. I held my breath. The basement was silent again, but it felt alive, waiting for my next move. I told myself to stay calm, that there had to be an explanation. Maybe someone else had been here, some other trespasser, but that didn't make sense. The house was far off the road. No one came here except me, at least not for years. And then I realized something worse. The scratches didn't just warn they were watching. Somehow, the house knew I was here. Somehow, it had marked me. I moved further into the basement, trying to shine my flashlight on every corner. The walls seemed to stretch farther than I remembered. The room larger and darker, as if it had grown while I wasn't looking. My camera captured strange shapes in the shadow, shapes that weren't there when I looked with my own eyes. Sometimes it looked like tall, thin figures standing perfectly still, staring. Sometimes it looked like faces pressed into the walls, eyes wide, mouths frozen in silent screams. My hands shook as I held the flashlight, and a cold sweat ran down my back. Then I noticed movement. A shadow flitted across the far wall, quick and impossible, disappearing the moment I tried to focus on it. My heart pounded. I took a step backward and my foot hit something soft. I bent down and shined my flashlight on it. It was a small pile of dirt, but mixed in with it were tiny scratches, like fingernails had scraped the ground. My stomach turned. Basement wasn't empty. It never had been. The camera caught something I didn't see at first. I watched the screen carefully, and my blood ran cold. For a split second I saw myself standing in the far corner of the basement, my own body staring back at me. My face was pale, eyes wide and empty, and my mouth was open in a scream that didn't exist in real life. I stumbled backward, tripping over a broken floorboard, and the camera fell to the ground. I scrambled to pick it up, but when I looked again, the figure was gone. Only the silence remained. I knew then that I had to leave. The basement was no longer just a room. It was something else, something alive and patient. But as I reached for the stairs, a sudden gust of cold air slammed the basement door shut. The lock clicked into place, even though it had no latch before. My flashlight flickered one last time before dying completely, plunging me into a darkness so thick it felt like it was pressing against my chest. And in that blackness I heard it soft, almost a whisper, but unmistakable. "You cannot leave. You belong here." I couldn't sleep. Even after I escaped the basement that day, my mind refused to rest. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the scratches, the jagged letters warning me to leave. My dreams were worse than any nightmare I had ever had. I was back in the basement, crawling across the floor, the walls stretching higher and higher, closing in around me. Shadows moved along the corners of my vision, tall and silent, and whispers echoed through the darkness, soft and insistent, calling my name. I would wake up gasping, drenched in sweat, my heart hammering like it wanted to escape my chest. During the day, I could feel the house everywhere. I would walk down the street, and a shadow would flicker at the corner of my vision. A strange draft would brush against my neck, though the wind was still. Even my camera seemed to betray me. I reviewed the footage I had taken in the basement, and it was worse than I remembered. Figures appeared in the background that I could not see in percentile, dark shapes standing silently, staring, sometimes moving just out of frame. One clip showed my own reflection in a broken mirror, but my eyes were hollow, empty of life. I couldn't explain it, and I didn't want to try. I knew I had to go back. I had to understand what was happening, why the house seemed alive, why it had marked me. I gathered lights, my camera and my phone again, though a small, rational part of me screamed that I was making a terrible mistake. But the compulsion was stronger than fear. The house had taken root in my mind, and no matter what I did, it would not let me go. The front door creaked as I pushed it open, and I felt the familiar pull, the oppressive presence that had followed me home. The house seemed unchanged, yet the air was thicker, heavier, as if it had been waiting for me. My flashlight cut through the darkness, illuminating the peeling walls, the broken furniture, the scattered debris. Everything was still, silent, but I could feel the eyes in the shadows unblinking, following my every move. I moved toward the basement stairs, my flashlight shaking in my hand. The door was open, as if inviting me back. I hesitated, trying to convince myself to leave, but it was too late. I stepped inside, and the familiar cold air hit me like a fist. The smell of damp and rust was stronger this time, more suffocating, more alive. Shapes shifted just beyond the reach of my light, and I could feel their attention pressing against me. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The scratches were still there, but something had changed. They had multiplied, covering the walls, the floor, even the ceiling in places. Words formed in jagged, uneven letters. "You belong to us." My camera caught movement again, figures that weren't there before, crawling along the walls, twisting in ways that made my stomach churn. One figure, pale and thin, moved toward me slowly, its face blank and its eyes dark voids. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the broken floorboards, and my flashlight flickered. The figure vanished in the brief darkness, leaving only silence and the oppressive cold. I realized then that I was not alone. Something else was in the basement with me, something that had been there the whole time, watching, waiting. It had been patient, learning me, understanding me. I felt its gaze on my back, heavy and unrelenting, and I couldn't move. My breath came in shallow gasps as I tried to convince myself it was my mind, that fear had made the shadows come alive. But deep down, I knew it was real. I turned slowly, forcing myself to look, and the sight froze me. In the corner of the basement, standing perfectly still, was my own reflection, or something that looked exactly like me. Its eyes were empty, its mouth twisted in a silent scream. Its hands were clawed, covered in deep scratches, and it reached out toward me, though it didn't move. I couldn't tell if it was alive, or just a shadow wearing my face. Panic surged through me, and I stumbled backward, nearly toppling my flashlight. A whisper floated through the darkness, soft but insistent. "Come closer. Join us." My heart pounded, and the basement seemed to pulse around me. Shadows lengthened, creeping along the walls, forming shapes that I could barely recognize. I tried to run, but the air thickened, resisting my movement. I could feel the floor beneath me shifting, as if the house itself was alive, holding me in place. I understood then, in the deepest part of my mind, that the house did not just trap people. It watched them, learned them, and then it created them. It was patient, it was hungry, and I was already a part of it. I had no choice but to return. Sleep was impossible, my mind consumed by the basement, by the shadows, by that horrifying reflection of myself. Every waking moment, I could feel it lurking just beyond perception, its presence pressing into me, silent but insistent. I tried to avoid the thought, tried to convince myself that I could leave it behind, but the pull was too strong. The house had marked me, I knew it, and no matter how far I ran, it would find me again. The house looked different this time. The broken windows seemed darker, the rotting wood blacker, as if it had grown more sinister in my absence. The air outside was still, but heavy, almost thick, like the very atmosphere was resisting me. As I approached, the "Do Not Enter" sign creaked in the wind, though no breeze moved it. It felt like a warning. I hesitated at the gate, my heart hammering, but curiosity and dread pushed me forward. Inside, the house was alive in a way that made my skin crawl. Shadows stretched across the walls unnaturally, bending corners and twisting furniture into forms that didn't belong. The smell of damp and iron hit me immediately, stronger than before. I moved slowly, my flashlight cutting through the darkness in narrow beams, revealing peeling wallpaper, broken chairs, and scattered debris. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a voice whispering warnings I could not understand. The basement stairs loomed before me, dark and inviting, and I stepped down with a sinking feeling in my chest. The door was open, just as it had been before, and the air inside was colder, heavier, thicker, pressing into me like a living thing. Shapes moved just beyond my flashlight's reach, quick and silent, vanishing whenever I tried to focus on them. My heart pounded as I shone the light across the walls, and I noticed that the scratches had multiplied. They now covered the floor, the ceiling, even the corners where shadows clung. Words formed in jagged fresh letters. "Stay." I stumbled deeper into the basement, the camera in my hand shaking. The figures I had seen before were back tall, thin, and faceless, twisting along the walls, crawling from the shadows. Some moved with impossible speed, others remained still, watching me. The reflection of myself in a broken mirror caught my eye again, but this time it wasn't me. It was pale, twisted, and its eyes were hollow. Its hands were etched with deep scratches, and its mouth opened in a silent scream that seemed to echo in my skull. I tried to leave, to run toward the stairs, but the air itself seemed to resist me. Shadows pressed against my back, wrapping around me, holding me in place. The floor beneath me shifted, moving subtly, forcing me to stumble. My flashlight flickered, and I could hear a faint whisper, soft and insistent. "You were never alone. You never will be." Panic surged through me, and I fell to my knees, trying to claw at the ground, desperate to escape. Then I saw it. A figure emerged from the far corner, taller than any human should be, its face featureless, its movements jerky and unnatural. It extended a hand toward me, and I realized with a sickening certainty that it was not alone. Figures continued to emerge from the shadows, twisting and crawling, their presence heavy and suffocating. The basement seemed to pulse with them, alive in a way that was more than walls and wood. It was a living trap, a predator, and I was its prey. The camera slipped from my grasp, clattering to the floor. I scrambled to pick it up, but the figures were already closing in. One reached me, cold and solid despite being nothing more than shadow. It pressed against me, not physically, but mentally, a pressure that stole my breath and made my vision swim. I understood then that the house didn't just hold people. It learned them, shaped them, consumed them. It had been patient for centuries, collecting victims, learning their fears, until they became part of its walls. I tried to scream, but my voice was gone. My hands reached for the stairs, for some exit, any escape, but the shadows coiled around me like ropes, lifting me off my feet. I could see their faces, now featureless, blank, staring through me. They whispered in unison, "Stay, belong, become." My heart hammered, and the basement seemed to twist and stretch, elongating, consuming, swallowing everything. And then I felt at the last part of me that was still human slipping away. My reflection in the mirror blinked one final time before I saw nothing but blackness. The basement was alive, and it had claimed me. I was part of it now. I don't remember how long I was in the basement after that. Time seemed to stretch and shatter into nothing. Minutes could have been hours, hours could have been days. The shadows moved constantly, curling and twisting along the walls, pressing against me from every side. Their whispers became louder, insistent, urgent, filling my head with words I didn't want to hear but could not escape. "You belong, you belong, you belong." I tried to resist, to push back, but the basement had become more than a place. It had become a prison, a living thing that knew me better than I knew myself. I tried to move, but the shadows held me. They pressed into my limbs, sapped my strength, and I could feel my own body slipping from me, piece by piece. The air was thick with a metallic smell, and I could taste rust and dirt on my tongue. My camera lay shattered somewhere on the floor, and every time I blinked, I could see glimpses of myself, my own reflection twisting and mutating in the broken mirrors. My face was pale, my eyes hollow, my mouth frozen in a scream I could not make. My hands were scratched and bleeding, etched with jagged letters that spelled warnings I could not read. The shadows began to take shape around me, forming figures that were almost human, but wrong. Their movements were jerky, their faces blank, their eyes empty voids. I realized with terror that they were previous victims, trapped in this place, twisted into forms that could no longer escape. Their hands reached for me, their fingers brushing against my skin without touching, pressing deep into my mind. I could hear their thoughts, their memories, their fears. The house had learned them all, just as it was learning me. I understood then that the house did not merely trap people, it consumed them, folded them into itself, and left behind a shadow, a hollow version of the person that looked real to the world outside. My reflection, my clone, the thing that had stared at me in the mirror, it wasn't me. I realized, with a cold, sinking terror, that the thing standing in the basement was now me, or what would soon become me. Panic surged through me as I tried to resist. I ran toward the broken window, desperate to escape, but the shadows blocked me. They moved like living walls, shifting with impossible speed, curling around me, lifting me off my feet. The floor beneath me trembled and writhed like it had a heartbeat of its own. The walls stretched and twisted, elongating the basement into a space that defied reason, a place where escape was impossible. I could hear my own voice now, echoing from the shadows, screaming silently. My mind was splitting, the last fragments of myself dissolving into the darkness. And then, in a moment that burned into my consciousness, I saw it, my reflection, my hollow twin, standing in the center of the basement, looking at me with empty eyes. It reached out and touched my chest, and I felt myself unravel, slipping into that figure. I became hollow. I became part of the house. And yet, even as I was absorbed, a small horrifying thought remained. The house was not done. It never finished. It waits, always, for the next person to stumble upon it, to open the door, to enter the darkness. I understood that the warnings, the scratches, the whispered words, the cold presence were not merely messages. They were invitations. They were traps. They were promises that the house would continue, generation after generation, feeding on fear, consuming curiosity, creating more hollow versions of the living. Some part of me, the part that still remembers sunlight and air and the beating of my own heart, screamed to anyone who might come after me, "Do not enter. The basement is alive. It sees you. It waits. And if you go inside, if you ignore the warning, you will not come out as yourself. You will become another shadow, another whisper, another hollow copy trapped forever in the walls. I don't know if I am still here, if any piece of me remains, or if I am already nothing more than a warning, etched into the wood and stone, ready for the next victim. But I know this, I can feel it even now, in the dark corners of my mind. The house is patient. The house is eternal. The house is hungry, and the sign, swinging in the wind outside, is waiting for someone else. Do not enter, and maybe, if you are reading this, it is already too late.